We're going to talk about today why love bombing works. We're going to talk about, I'm going to start over again just in case that first part got missed. We're going to talk about today about why love bombing works. What happens in these relationships that make us feel pulled in, like we've met an amazing person. And we're going to get into the what's different about it, what makes it so particularly toxic. But then we're also going to talk about what happens, what it offers for us psychologically, because there's just one part of it to identify the need, the way in which it engages us or is so intoxicating and pulls us in. But we also need to look at our piece about what it engages within us that makes us susceptible to it, because there's always two pieces to this. There's the piece that is being used to make it effective and to make it a highly seductive, but then there's the other piece that ends up making it appeals to us, that it pulls from something within us psychologically. So I want to look at both ends of that today, not just why is it love bombing and why is it so effective, but I also want to look at psychologically, why is it effective with me? Why is it effective with you? So what is it that it's inherently appealing to within our nature that makes us vulnerable? So if you're new to me or new to this live, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience, and I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. So I have experienced love bombing, and I'll tell you, it was the most intoxicating experience I've ever had in my life. But prior to meeting this person, I thought that it was a bunch of hogwash and the idea of a soulmate was all made up and was just all hype. And then when I experienced it, geez, it was I mean, yeah, it's amazing. It's a really amazing experience, and I can see why it works because it worked. I mean, I got into a relationship and it worked. So in fact, I started reading Robert Greene's book called The Art of Seduction, which is really a disturbing book. Honestly, I not I find it extremely uncomfortable. But he talks about why seduction works, and the intent is to use your innate abilities, your strengths. He talks about Marilyn Monroe's strength appealing kind of childlike, sort of this waif, this innocent female waif mixed with the sexuality was extremely appealing and really made her highly popular. And he points out in the book that Dr. Green points out in the book that Marilyn Monroe spent hours in front of the mirror, not because she was that narcissistic and was that enthralled with her image, but because she was honing her look and honing the mannerisms and how she was going to speak and the voice. In fact, she initially had a higher pitch voice, and they urged her to drop it into a lower register so that it was more of this husky, breathy, sexy voice. That persona was designed intentionally to be seductive. I don't know if Marilyn Monroe loved bomb, but she certainly loved bomb busts in the movies, didn't she? I mean, she was highly, highly appealing. So it's a fascinating book. If you want to look into that and you want to read what's happening on the back end for those who are seductive or seducers, I highly recommend you check out Dr. Robert Greene's book, The Art of Seduction. So, but we're going to talk about, because love bombing is actually an art of seduction. We're all being seduced into a relationship with someone who's pretending to be our perfect match, our soulmate. And so let's talk about why that works and because here's the reason why. Some of you may say, well, I'm in a relationship. Why should we spend time talking about something when I want help getting out? I already know what love bombing is. I got love bombed. That's why I'm where I'm at. I now just want to, like, how do I survive this really awful person? And how do I get out of it so that I'm intact, so that my whole life is not blown apart. I understand that, certainly. But here's the other piece, is that we don't want it to happen again. In fact, Candy just said that to me. We don't want it to happen again. And the problem is that love bombing isn't just effective with victims. It isn't just effective because you've had a traumatized past or because you've been abused before. It's effective because it appeals to all of our innate needs different ones for different ones of us, but we all are hardwired for belonging. We're all hardwired for connection and for relationship. And so if you don't understand why it worked the first time, you're not going to understand when it happens again. And it doesn't just happen in romantic relationships either. It also can happen in your work relationship. Maybe you meet a new company and you get love bomb into thinking this is the perfect company to work for. Or maybe you are looking for new friends and you end up thinking that you met the perfect friend who really understands exactly everything that you're going through. Or you moved into a neighborhood and you're being love bombed to join the neighborhood association. So I want to warn you that love bombing is not specific to romantic relationships, but it can be applied to other types of relationships. So it's really important for us to understand what is appealing to us that makes us susceptible to it, because what appeals to me is going to be a little different than what it appeals to you, and it's important for you to know what kind of hooks they're aiming for. So let me start there, because we usually talk into what love bombing is. So if you've been on any of these platforms, chances are you've heard, oh, it's super intense interest. It's a rapid progression. This person uses incredible experiences to build this big high. You've heard all of this. This isn't new information, but I want to jump into our psychological vulnerabilities in the back end that makes us very susceptible. And then I'd like to ask you, as you're listening to these, which of these apply to you? So when this happened to you, hopefully it hasn't, but if it has, and I know most of you here listening probably it has, which of these needs did it appeal to? So I'm going to list them. There's 9 of them. And then we're going to go through, and if there's one of them you want us to talk about more, or if there's something you didn't understand, or maybe you want to know, how do I reduce my vulnerability around this need? We can certainly dive into it. So the first need is the need for affection or belonging, and that is hardwired in all of us. They've actually shown in research that infants' heart rates, their blood pressure, their temperature, their body temperature becomes more regulated when they're held in touch. We're just hardwired for belonging. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to make that different than that, other than being aware that you need to know that you're important. You need to know that you're a part of a community, that you matter, that people want to relate to you. That's super, super important. And if you're new here again, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I'm a licensed mental health clinician, and we're talking about why love bombing is so incredibly effective. Then they also, all of us have some narcissistic needs. This isn't the same as being a narcissist. You can actually see these needs as just sort of ego needs. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Clinically, we talk about it as narcissistic needs, but it really is just the need to be validated and recognized. There's nothing pathological about wanting to be validated and recognized. We all want to be seen and heard and seen as important and listened to. That's just a normal part of all of our functioning. What happens is they're very good at recognizing our innate need for that. And despite the fact that actually is a hyper need, an excessive need of theirs, they tap into it in the beginning into us and make us feel super seen and like we're super special. And they kind of like everything that was ever not perfectly met in that arena for our lives, they sort of like make you feel like you've got it in this person. I remember mine telling me that he'd never felt like this before. I mean, how wonderful is that to hear that somebody meets you and feels such a connection that they say that this is something extra special, that they've never met anyone like you before. I mean, they'll say things like that, and that is tapping into your need for recognition and validation. So that is need number 2. Need number 3 that's built into all of us that they're using as a vulnerability is our need for security and stability. What you'll hear right away in love bombing is that they'll like paint a picture of the future. Like, wouldn't it be really cool if we did these things together? Or can you imagine living here and living in this place? Mine on the first date, and I kid you not, told me, because he lived out of state, he lived in another state, that he was actually thinking about moving to the state where I lived. We hadn't even met. He's telling me on the first date, and we just met, that he was already thinking about whether or not he could get a job near where I lived. I mean, it was way too soon to be hearing that. Now, these days, I would hear that and like, dude, I think we need to leave, even figure out if we like each other first. I would have like seen that as a huge red flag. But back then, before I knew what love bombing was, I thought it was sweet. It felt very flattering to have someone not only want to be in a relationship, but also so much so that they were willing to consider relocating for me. I just felt like, wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. So be careful about that because it's tapping in your need for security, your need to find a stable partner. And that's a normal thing, but they're using that as a leverage against you in these toxic relationships. Nikki says, that sounds like my ex. Everybody he meets, he thinks is the one. Yeah, exactly. So be super, super careful with that. Yeah. So Andrew, Tammy's saying it's easy to spot when you're out of it and you're looking back. Exactly. These things are definitely hindsight things, and that's why let's let once you know them, you can put them in, use them for the next time. So that like let's back up to the need for belonging. It's not wrong to want to belong. If you're like I think of it like going into the grocery store. I don't well, I try not to go grocery shopping when I'm hungry because I overbuy. So if you're in a really like lonely spot, that would be a time when I say to myself, I'd be really careful about the people I meet right now because I'm particularly vulnerable around my need for belonging. So, what can I do to meet that need in normal ways with people I know who are healthy, with more established ways? I wouldn't like maybe try to introduce someone new as a way to fix my loneliness. I know it makes like no sense. It's like, but Carrie, if you're lonely, that means there's not a lot of people in your life. So, wouldn't you want to meet new people? Yes, of course you do. But be careful if someone matches too perfectly in that and like they like show up as the answer because nothing is that if it's too good to be true it probably is. So be careful about that. I've seen friendships do that too. You meet somebody and you think, oh, we have an amazing click, maybe this is going to solve. And I like say you go to college for the first time and you don't know anybody and you meet somebody in orientation and you have this amazing click and you think, oh, this is the person that's going to answer all my problems. Well, I take the same time that you would take any time to get to know someone. So be careful during those periods that your vulnerability isn't making you rush this, isn't making you kind of like over overlook things that you normally wouldn't look because you're really, really needy in that moment. I had that happen when I first moved here to Texas. I didn't know anybody. I'd moved here because my relationship was ending and my kids were leaving here and one of my kids was sick. And I met somebody at the apartment pool and we struck up this great conversation. And I just felt like she just felt like everything to me. Like she felt like she even introduced me to her friends. How sweet is that? Well, I found out she was highly toxic. I mean, like catastrophically awful. So, but I overlooked some of the, I mean, she talked too much and talked a lot about herself and tend to cut me off, but I kind of thought, oh, well, I can control these pieces. And it's not going to get out of it's not going to get away from me. But yet, you know what? It did. And chances are, if you're in a similar kind of vulnerable spot, it's going to get away from you too. So just be really, really careful. So the fourth need, so the first need is a need for affection. The second is a need for validation and recognition. The third is need for stability and security. The fourth one is need for self-worth. All of us want to know. In fact, they found this out in about 1940s with Dr. Dr. Kohat Hines, or yeah, Heinz Kohat. Sorry, inverted the name. Heinz Kohat was working with residents, medical residents in Chicago, and he identified that we had twin needs, and that he noticed that among this population there was a high rate of narcissism. And this is where one of the ideas of the developmental roots of narcissism is in missing these needs. Now, we also now know there's a genetic component, but there's probably other pieces that make this happen. But every one of us has an innate need to be mirrored, meaning we need to have someone understand our feelings and understand them correctly. But we also are looking for someone who can um, think that we're extra special. And that should be our parents, where they count our toes and they kiss our toes and they look at our fingers and they think we're perfect and that there's no baby prettier than us. And we need to have that. He called it being the apple of our parents' eye. We need to have that need filled within us. And that's the basis of self-worth. Now think of it, an infant is nursing and gazing at the mother's face, and the mother stares back at the infant and says, "Oh, you're so precious. I love you so much." And then that reciprocity in that experience, the infant says, "Oh, I'm good. I'm worthy of love." So that's what's happening in that process. But we walk away from it with still wanting it in the world. And that's where we kind of have this little bit of this, what probably would be called clinically a narcissistic hunger. I'm not saying you're narcissist, but I'm saying that we all have this innate kind of desire to be special, to know that we're unique, that there's no one quite like us in the world. And they tap into this beautifully. So love bombers will do something like say, I've never met anybody as wonderful as you. You are so, you do that so well, or you're so talented. They'll kind of like they'll praise you. And here's one of the things that one of my mentors said back in graduate school when I was finishing my doctorate. He said, narcissist or toxic people like narcissists will treat you like a nugget of gold, but be careful. If you're a nugget of gold, in the next minute, you're going to turn into a piece of shit. So be really, really careful with somebody who does a lot of flattery or building you up or putting you on a pedestal. It feels wonderful when it's happening. We love that because we love to be knowing that we're something special about us. But if they do it, that also means that that pedestal can be knocked out from underneath of you. So be super, super careful about that one. And who doesn't want to feel like we are really, really wonderful? So that's need number 4. Queer femme Care Bear is asking, do they know that they're doing this manipulatively? Is it unintentional or is it unconscious? That's a good question. I think for some of them, because I'm going to break away from my list of 9, so we're halfway through them. I think for some of them, they do know that it's intentional. It's the art of seduction. They're very good at knowing that this is what people want to hear. They've done this before, and it works really, really well. I mean, it's a great pickup line, or it works really well when you're getting to know somebody. But so it may be something they've learned, but it also, I think for some of them, this is what they found. The mind of a predator, of a toxic individual is more predatory, works really different than the mind of an average person. It's actually neurodivergent. Certain areas are more active than others. And one of the areas that's very active is that primitive brain. They're literally hunting. Imagine a wolf out looking for prey, and they just kind of be able to, they sense things. They pick up things that maybe cues and clues and indications that maybe you and I are not picking up. And I think some of this is hardwired into them. It's almost unconscious. So I think some of it is intentional, but I also think some of it is just they're really good at it. They're unfortunately super, super good at it. And I'm glad you like my earring, Sugar Cookie. I love your name. Sugar Cookie's a good name. So be careful about that. Be careful with somebody who's really good at that. Need number 5. And for those of you who are joining me and are not familiar with me or my platform, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I'm a licensed mental health clinician, and I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. And we're talking about why love bombing is so incredibly effective. And we're not talking about what is love bombing and what makes love bombing different than real love. We can talk about that, but right now we're talking about one of the psychological aspects that it's appealing to us within us, that why we're susceptible to it. And these needs, by the way, I want you to hear this. Please hear this. For you who are here right now, hear this. These needs are not pathological needs. None of these are pathological. These are innate psychological needs that we all have. It'd be like me saying you should never be hungry. If you're hungry and you go grocery shopping and you overspend, bad you. You should never have been hungry and you wouldn't have been overspent when you're at the grocery store. That's ridiculous. These needs are part of who you and I are. They make us human. But where we need to be careful with it is just like not walking into the grocery store hungry. You're more vulnerable to overspending, or more vulnerable buying food that you don't necessarily need or want or is good for you. We need to be aware of when we're feeling empty in these needs, or vulnerable, or where maybe we've had something happen in our life that's making us um, particularly in a transition or particularly difficult time. For example, I met my narcissistic person right after I had lost my long-term marriage. My husband and I had been married 31 years. I knew him for 33 years. I was widowed and I was 1 year out. And my life had been devastated. I'd lost stability. I lost security. I had lost a relationship that I had my entire life that gave me a sense of belonging. And my late husband loved me to death. He gave me a lot of validation. He was very good about giving me compliments and making me feel really special and really unique. We had a great relationship. I lost all of that. So I was in a really vulnerable spot, wanting a lot of that back. And you can hear how this person offered affection, this person made me feel seen, this person offered security, this person built up my self-worth. I mean, all these things that I was feeling like a loss, like I had a lack of in my life, he stepped right in and he then offered to be able to fill this in. Yeah, Angel said, I'm so jealous. Here's the thing, Angel, I'd say all of that, but no relationship's perfect. Certainly my first husband and I had issues. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but yes, I know some of you have only known abusive relationships, and and that relationship had a period where it wasn't all that perfect either, but he was at least not a narcissist, and so things got better. And I know it's hard to hear about a good relationship when you feel like all you're seeing is bad relationships, but my heart goes out to you. I want that for all of you. I want that back for me again. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So need number 4 is they appeal to our self-worth. So then number 5 is the need to feel special or unique. And that is, again, that's kind of ties into self-worth, but they where this is a little different is they make it feel like this bond is unlike any other bond that any of you could ever have with anybody else. They'll say, like mine said to me, I've never shared this with anybody before. Like something about you and what we have is so special and so different that I'm going to places with you that I've never done before. So you'll hear that. You'll hear this way that that you guys have, yeah, exactly. Chelsea said, I've never felt this way before with anyone. Exactly. Or mine said, I've never shared this with anyone before. Or here's a secret I've never told anyone before. So really be careful about this appealing to that there's something so unique about you and him or you and her that they're going places with you that they've never gone before. So be careful for number 5. Number 6 is a need for autonomy and control. Now this is a wild one. This is a super wild one. So when you first meet them, they'll give you a lot of control. They'll ask for your opinion. They'll do something really special for you. They'll actually, like, here's what mine did. We went on a date and we were ordering pizza and he handed me his credit card and he let me order with his credit card. And I remember thinking, you don't really know me. Why are you handing your credit card to me? I thought that was really strange. Why don't you just take the phone and put in your own credit card number over the phone? It just felt like odd. But see, he was giving me control and autonomy in that moment. Another one was one time he handed me his phone for something. It was not working and he wanted me to help him with something. Well, actually, he shouldn't have, because I backed the phone up and later discovered, years later, that he'd been super cheating on me at the time when we were dating. But he trusted me with his phone, and I just thought that was really strange. So pay attention. Now, I'm not saying any of those things are indicators. I'm not. Maybe that's normal in your situation. But what I'm pointing out was it felt odd to me. It felt odd, like he was trusting me with something that the relationship wasn't ready for. So someone just asked, what is autonomy? Autonomy means your personal freedom. It's like free will would be another great word for autonomy. Free will. So they're giving you a lot of like freedom or access to them in a way that's odd and not warranted. Our relationship is too new for him to warrant giving me his phone only a month and a half in to help him with some issue with it. Our relationship is too new for him to give me the credit card to order something with. It was just odd. So you'll notice they'll trust you with something that you haven't earned that right to be trusted with, and that feels weird. But later, they're going to end up then taking control and autonomy away from you. They're going to really limit that and reverse things on you. But in the beginning, they sort of like lull you into thinking that this is going to be a safe relationship by giving you something that feels not too early, not ready. So that's number 6. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I am a licensed I'm actually a psychologist with 20 years of practice. And these days, I actually run a club called Toxic Free Relationship Club. So if you're looking for help, we have actually weekly office hours, which you could kind of say like group coaching, but it's not, because we talk about whatever is pressing. So we actually meet with me each week. So 4 hours a week you get with me as a group. You also get emailed support that gives you helps and tips. You get access to my course. You get access to past webinars. You also get all this fantastic online support and community, which some of my members are here on the live, which I always love that they're here and hanging out with me. Thank you guys. You guys are so special to me. So if you are looking for that kind of club, or you're looking for that kind of support, maybe you're not for sure coaching is right for you. Maybe you're not for sure you've been in coaching, but you want to not do it anymore. You're not quite ready to be out on your own. Or maybe you're just looking for just a safe place. It's a fantastic place. And it is, I want to let you know that it's not cheap. But it's less than a coaching call a month. So think of that: 4 hours with me in group with me live. We're going to do this right after this, in fact. And then you get to actually, it's all 4 hours is less than 1 hour if you had to pay for me for coaching. So, and I don't do coaching these days, but I know that the total cost of this is cheaper than coaching. So if you're looking for that kind of support, please reach out to me. You can check out my links. Also, I will make sure in the live on YouTube that I put it in the live below so that you guys can find that page and do that. It's really, really, really a great space, and there's so much packed into it. So number 7, they give you a need and a purpose. They give you a purpose and meaning. So think back to my story that I shared with you, and that is, oh, Katie, I'd love to have you join. And also I saw somebody else said that they would love to join too. I would love to have you. I think it's Charlene. Yeah, I would love to have you guys. Check out the links in my bio. It's fantastic. Yeah, Charlene. I would love to have you join. It's a really amazing group. I can't say enough about it. Like I said, several here right now are talking to you, are in that club, and it's really, really amazing. Yeah, and if you have financial difficulties, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm all the time making private arrangements. So I am willing to negotiate the fee, because I don't want the fee to be what stands in the way of you getting the support that you need. I really don't. So don't let that be an issue. Yeah, so they'll give you a purpose and meaning. You think back to my story. Here I am. I'm widowed. I closed my practice to help take care of my husband. I'm kind of betwixt and between. I'm starting to write for the first time. And Tammy, the best way to contact me is there is email. I post email everywhere. You're welcome to use that. But also DM me. You can DM me through all these platforms. That's possible. So yeah, just reach out. Okay. And did you just ask for the signed book? I think I know who you are, and you asked me for a signed copy of my book, Love You More, and I emailed you back. So please check your email. I wrote you today. So for those of you who don't know, my whole story is in Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, Double Cross. I rushed that. I hate marketing. I hate it. But this is my story. What exactly happened? It's written like a novel. So if you're interested in just a good story, although you'll probably yell at me all the way through the book, why did you do that? I wouldn't have trusted him. That was stupid. Because you guys probably know way more than I knew at the time that I wrote this book. Definitely way more than when I was going through it, but way more than even when I wrote it. So I've been thinking about going back through and writing a case study, a psychological take on what happened in the story, so that you guys can hear the behind the scene, what's happening in my head, what I now know about narcissistic relationships, why I made the decisions that I did, to kind of give you all of the sort of the analysis of the story as a psychologist, the psychological analysis of the story. So if you want to know that you're not alone, and it can happen to anybody, because this happened, I had already been practicing 20 years. This starts when I'm widowed. So I'm a year out in the start of this book. And so I'm still feeling pretty decimated, and then I end up meeting my partner, which was probably the worst person I could ever found on earth. I swear. I think all of us feel that way, don't we? We all feel like that our partners are like terrible. But he gave me purpose and meaning. I felt adrift. I was lost, and then a relationship felt like it was going to solve so much that was going wrong. So watch out for that. Yeah, I noticed it's upside down. Yeah, and it's backwards because you got a mirror image of it. And you don't. Yeah, you do too. Everybody's got a mirror image of it. So love bombing. How long does it last? That's a great question. It depends on the relationship and how long it takes to get you into the relationship. So that's another hard part. The other part that's so awful about all of this is that they're monitoring your engagement. So when they know that you've made, it's what I call a small sacrifice. Let me get through 2 more, and then I'll come back to when does it end and why does it end. This is my theory. So hold on to that. about why I think it ends and when it ends because I want to it's powerful. But the eighth reason is they appeal to our need to avoid pain and rejection. So somehow they convince us that this relationship's going to be different than every relationship that you had. This is going to be the one that lasts. Now, here's the ironic part. Oh, yeah, I saw that video too about the cake shoving thing. Oh, in the bride's face. It is awful. But here's what they do. So mine had a track record of breaking every he got married, he'd been married 4 times before me, and of the last 2 marriages lasted less than 2 years. And he promised that he didn't wanna do that again, and this was gonna be different because there was a part of me like, "Dude, you have a track record, so how do I know you're not gonna be a different this is gonna be any different than the rest of the breakups that you have?" Not knowing that he was also having a whole history of lots of relationships. But he promised, oh, he didn't wanna do that again. He even took a psychological test with me about to see our compatibility, and he was doing all these things in order for us to have this really great relationship together. And, he said this was gonna be it. This is gonna be the one that's gonna make it. And there's a part of me that's like, I'm doubtful about that, but I also really wanted to believe it. And I certainly believed in it because I just spent 33 years with somebody. And the only reason that relationship ended is because my partner died. So I certainly had the need to want to have somebody stay with me and not lose this again. And the other thing I liked about him, the second guy, was he was 5 years younger than me, which didn't feel like any big deal because we were the same stage of life, same age of kids. But I liked it because that meant that maybe he was going to be healthier longer and I wouldn't suffer another loss. Because I'll tell you, going through one husband dying, I don't want to do it again. I mean, really, it just is not appealing to me. I mean, it's most horrific experience I've had. Not most horrific. I've now had a second really horrific experience, but terribly painful. So I don't really want to do that again. So this to me felt like, oh, this is going to be, we're going to have longevity here. So watch out for that. That person kind of makes you feel like you can avoid pain and rejection by being in this relationship. And then the ninth reason is for reciprocity. So one of the things that many people complain about, and men complain about it in a different way than women, but both genders complain about it, is a lack of reciprocity. Men will say women don't want sex enough. They don't want to be affectionate enough. They don't want to touch enough. And they feel love starved that way. They're really what they're saying is there's a lack of reciprocity. Women say men don't show up. They don't like check in. They don't ask about how their day goes. They don't act like a friend. They sort of leave them alone and disappear until they want sex and they show up and they push for sex. And the women end up feeling like I'm lonely. I've been taking care of the family and the kids or doing work and then you come and you want physical touch and I feel like we haven't connected. So why would I want to connect that way when we've not connected? But both partners are complaining about a lack of reciprocity. So what love bombers do when they first meet you is they seem to offer this perfect match. You feel like you've met somebody, they show up with gifts, they shower you with attention, they may be super affectionate, they're going to rush sexual intimacy and maybe that's super incredible, but you're going to feel this connectiveness and this reciprocity that you feel like you've been looking for your entire life. Watch out for that. It certainly won't stay that way because once you get into a relationship, the worst thing a narcissist are at is intimacy. They don't know how to do intimacy, so they won't be present. You'll never be lonelier than you will be in that relationship. So this is just something that just happens in the beginning to get you into the relationship. So let's talk about how does it end and what happens to end it. And here, like somebody asked, is this intentional or is this all like unconscious and manipulative? Here's what I think. There's a piece of, again, think of this like art of seduction. It's a seduction of you. Love bombing is a seduction of you. So it ends when you've been seduced, meaning you're in, that they know you're in. So what's a good test of knowing that you're in? I think for each of us, it's going to be a little bit different. But for me, he asked me to sacrifice something big. He asked me to there was several if you read the story Love You More, you'll see several sacrifices. One is I wear a wig. He wanted me to go without my wig when I was around him. So he wanted me, which up to that point I had never done. Today I do. I let my kids see me without my wig. I let some of my close friends see me without my wig. I don't like hide that part of myself anymore. But at the time, I let nobody, not even my late husband, saw me without my wig. No one saw me without my wig. And he asked for that, and he said that if I wouldn't do it, we were over. He threatened the relationship if I didn't do that. But you may find it around other things. You might find that they'll ask you to do something financially with them, take a big risk financially. Maybe they'll ask you to make a choice between them and your kids. They'll put you in a bad position with the kids. Maybe they'll ask you to do, but you'll find something they're going to ask you to make a sacrifice, and you'll feel that the relationship is in jeopardy if you don't do it. Maybe it's to make a move. Maybe it's, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something that's unique to you. When you do that, when you give in on that, you've told them you're in. You're all in, and that it's worked. And then from that point on, the relationship's going to be back, it's going to be downhill. They'll have moved into, they'll already probably have already induced mild criticism, but it's all done in your best interest. This is how mine did it. He would say, I'm only trying to help you. I'm letting you know these things because I really want you to be the best that you can possibly be. Okay, that sounds nice. And he did couch it politely, but that's the beginning of the criticisms that become worse and worse and worse. And later in the relationship, it's not nice and it's not phrased well. And they're just shitting on you. So there's not anything good about it, but it starts out really sweet and it just turns into something super nasty. So be careful about all of this because this is grooming you. You've been targeted and you're grooming to exactly. They've been pandering to your insecurities. Exactly. Yeah, he got you in to start a business. And of course, you paid for everything. Exactly. There is your sacrifice. See, when you did that, you then signaled you were in. You were in and they knew that they had you. So from when that happens, then they relax and they stop doing so much effort. You'll see the love bombing at that point starts to stop. And then you'll start to see new pieces of them. Exactly. When you pass the test, they start to stop. It's not remember, breadcrumbing is always like a form of love bombing. So they don't completely stop. Whenever they think they're losing you, they'll swing back and do a lesser than lesser than lesser version of it. I love the video put out by Cynthia. She's called Sinful on TikTok. I don't know what she calls herself on Instagram. And I don't even know if she's on YouTube, but she has a really great video. When in the beginning, they give you this big loaf of bread tied in a bow and say, here you go, love. I love you so much. And then the next time they give you a loaf without the bow, and then they give you several slices, and then they give you a slice, and then eventually they give you a little crumb. That's actually how love bombing works. So it never like fully stops. It just changes depending on the need in order to keep you in the relationship. That's the whole intent of it. The intent of it is to keep you hooked and invested so that you feel like you don't want to lose this best thing ever. Because listen to that list I'm going to read that list again really quick. The list again of how they're applying to our psychological needs is they appeal to our need for affection and belonging, our need for validation and recognition, our need for security and stability, our need for self-worth, a need to feel special, a need for control, a need for purpose, a need to avoid pain, a need for reciprocity. Those are all fantastic things. Those are all a part of every single one of us all the time. And they've now just given you this amazing experience. Why would you then not keep thinking, I want this to work out? Good. Who doesn't want a relationship like that? To me, that's nirvana. I feel like I've been dropped into a utopia. The last one is need for reciprocity, which is the need to have somebody invest in much into you as you're investing into them. Oh, thank you so much. The AI, like, oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So yeah, who would not want it? Thank you guys. Who would not want all that? I would certainly want all that. So yeah, it's very powerful. And again, hear me if you missed me saying this earlier. None of these things are wrong to want. These are all normal, psychological, innate needs that we have. You being you are wired to want these things and to look for these things in life, in relationships with people. Unfortunately, they'll never be perfectly present in any relationship. That's the hard part. We all have to kind of like deal with ourselves is the fact that life is imperfect. No one will perfectly see us. No one will perfectly support us. No one perfectly provides like recognition and stability. So be really aware that it's not wrong to want these things. It's not pathological to want these things. It's just not going to be perfectly present. And that's where the work, what we're doing in the club, Toxic Free Relationship Club, if those of you who may not heard me say, it's a great space to talk about these things and talk about how to get these needs met in a more healthy way, how to grieve the fact that we all want that, and how to process the fact that someone betrayed us around these things. It's so painful to have that kind of betrayal. And if you end up feeling like you're alone, please check out my book, knowing that you're not the only one that made the mistake. I made the mistake and talk about it in my book, Love You More. It's very, very normal for us to want these things. So, okay, I have a few minutes left, about like 10, 15 minutes left. And I end up, we can talk about any questions you have around love bombing or anything else. I know somebody just asked um, about oh, Jen, so let me kind of start answering some of your questions. So Jen wants to know, I'm ruminating about whether or not they're a narcissist or not a narcissist. So that's easy to find out. I have actually a quiz, Jen. It's in the link in my bio. It's called Am I the Narcissist? You can answer it for them, take the questions and apply it to them, or you can take it for yourself and find out how narcissistic you are. And that way you'll be able to sort of like answer the question, am I the problem or were they the problem? Because that's a common issue that you're experiencing. A lot of us feel like because they blame shift, I mean, they take no accountability. And they also, the narcissism, it's part of their hardwiring. So they don't see themselves as the source of the problem. You having a problem with them is the problem. So they make you feel like you're the problem. That's super common. Because okay, for example, I'm autistic. I don't know what it's like not to be autistic, and I don't feel like being autistic is a problem. I mean, I don't always like the handicaps I deal with, but I don't feel problematic. Does that make sense? It's who I am. I don't feel like it's problematic. People who ADHD would say, well, they've always lived that way. They don't know that that scattered forgetfulness, disorganization is a problem because that's the way they've lived their whole life. We find that it's problematic for being around them. Same with narcissists. Narcissists are hardwired that way. They are hardwired looking for admiration and attention and grandiosity, and they think they're superior. They just believe that they're different and better than everybody else. So they don't see that as an issue. They see you not liking it and having a problem with them is the issue. So that's why trying to get them changed doesn't work. That's why you telling them, that they're driving you nuts doesn't work, because they're like, I don't have a problem with me. If you have a problem, the problem is you. You have the problem. That's yeah, you can tell I've heard that a lot. So check out the link in my bio. And if you can't find the link in my bio, DM me and I'd be happy to send you the link. So somebody's asking me, somebody kept asking about schema chemistry. I don't know what schema chemistry is. So I don't mean to be ignoring you. I just don't know what that is. If you want to send me information on it and get my opinion, I'd be happy to do that for you. And I'm also reading some of your comments. Yeah. Yeah, so I hope Care Bear, you heard that I don't think that they can be changed. No, it's part of their hard wiring. And does it get worse? It tends, yeah, it gets worse because the more you put up with it, the more disrespect and contempt they hold for you. So they end up thinking, well, you put up with it, you must want it. And so then I can be my full ugly self with you. Oh, that's interesting. So your ex has been in therapy and they're getting worse. That's interesting. Yeah. And my question is, are they actually doing the work, or are they just going to therapy and doing it in order to look like they're doing the work without really doing the work? I can't tell you as a psychologist how many people came into my office and didn't do any work. A lot. The majority, actually. It's rare to have a client come in and do the work. Oh, so schema therapy is supposed to treat Ph.D. Interesting. Yeah, thank you, Sly. I appreciate that. Yeah, mine lied too. BK is saying mine wasn't honest about with their therapist and it just got worse. Mine wasn't either. Mine had 2 years of therapy because I paid for all of it. And they just got the same. Yeah, Nikki, they just got better at learning how to hide it. They just learned the language, learned how to gaslight me better, learned how to make it feel like it was more my problem and not theirs. And definitely, I agree with you, Cindy, on that. Don't go to couples therapy with someone who's cluster B. Don't do it. Because one, the therapist probably doesn't know that. They'll weaponize the therapy against them. So does therapy really work? Absolutely, user. It does really work. I mean, I've used therapy myself. I've been in and out of therapy for years, and I also have had clients that definitely improved. Definitely, definitely. I used to do private counseling. I don't these days. So no, I'm not taking patients that way, but I do offer 4 hours of group coaching through office hours, and I also have a group coaching 12 weeks that's starting up in 3 weeks or 2 weeks called Healed and Empowered. So if you're looking for 12 weeks focused specifically on healing after narcissistic abuse, like dealing with the guilt and the shame and the rage and the lack of closure and feeling really like devastated, and you're looking for like help and practical skill building, check out Healed and Empowered group coaching. It starts on Thursday, August 31st. Is it online? Yes, it's online. Everything these days is online, unfortunately. It's just hard to do it in person these days. Somebody asked, what's gray rock? So let's jump into that. Gray rock is a way to, it's also, there's yellow rock. So gray rock and yellow rock. So when you are in a relationship with a toxic person, they'll do these really funny things of getting us into arguments and debating things and making everything's like they'll double advocate you to the ends, and they'll like argue with you, pick fights with you over anything and everything, and you just can't like, I even start just dreading telling my partner anything because it is so tough. It would just launch into an argument, and I didn't want to hear how I was doing it wrong and how he would do it differently, or the ways that I wasn't holding my boundaries according to him because he didn't understand everything that was going on. So what I found was it was just better to be emotionally detached and just say something simple that deals with whatever they're saying without taking it any further. In other words, don't defend yourself. Have you heard the acronym JADE? It's don't justify, don't attack, don't defend, and don't explain. Just keep it simple. You say something simple. So it's not that you pick up a rock and throw at them. The point of it is you want to be as dull as a gray rock. That's the point. You want to be as dull as a gray rock. So maybe it's like, let's pick up some, I always talk about this one because it's a simple one for me. Did you take the trash out? Why did you take the trash out that way? I thought we said we'd tie it differently. You're like, oh, you want to resist rolling your eyes, and you'll say, oh, thanks for the reminder, you know, or okay, you can say just okay, or like, oh, okay, good point. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Maybe you don't like to say, maybe you don't want to give them a bone by saying, okay, I'll remember that next time or whatever. Okay, so that's fine. But find something simple, flat, that doesn't engage into the fight. That's the point. You're not engaging in the fight. That's not the same as love, or not the same as stonewalling. What often narcissists or toxic people will do is like, why are you not talking to me? Are you stonewalling me? I think you accuse me of stonewalling all the time. I think you're stonewalling me. So watch out for that. You're not. Stonewalling, what that is you bring up a topic and a person just turns around and leaves the room, or they go silent, or they just shut down and there's no conversation. There's two types of that happen. For some, they become overwhelmed and just like they feel undone and too excited, too upset, and they don't know how to discuss it. So if that's your partner, make a time, like say, let's come back in a half an hour and talk about this again. And then you go cool off and you talk about it. But people who are using real stonewalling, that's a device to actually punish you. It's teaching you a lesson that they don't want to talk about certain topics. They're letting you know that these things are off limits, and that whenever it comes up, they're just going to exit the conversation, and they're going to exit the relationship. Mine would, like, he would look at me and then he would disappear for 12 plus hours. Literally, he would walk out of the apartment and be gone for the night. And usually it happened at night. Isn't that convenient? I'm sure part of that was staged, so he'd have a reason to leave for the night. And then they just leave and they stop talking. I had a friend whose partner, whenever they got into a fight and he felt like she was wrong or at fault, he would literally shut down and stop talking to her for days. He would like go 3 days, 7 days, no talking. That's stonewalling. Sure. So Jessica just asked, can I talk about how autism can appear like narcissistic personality disorder? Yeah, absolutely. So I am autistic. My sons are autistic. So I'm quite familiar with it because I live around it. Autistic people have problems in four main areas: sensory processing, social cues, interpreting social cues. They often have, of course, I'm going blank and I can't think of them off the top of my head. Yeah, social sensory sensitivity, social cues. They often have communication issues, and then there's one more that I'm not thinking of. What happens though is because of these difficulties, they can have problems with empathy, not all forms of empathy. But they can be some issues with affective empathy, which is like crying at a Hallmark movie. So they may be able to relate to what it's like from putting themselves in your position. That's called cognitive empathy. So they can imagine what life would be like if they walked in your shoes, but they may not like emotionally emote a lot. They may, because people would say to me as a therapist, I always liked being with you because I you were so, non-reactive. Well, that's because I don't have a lot of affective empathy. So I didn't always have an emotional reaction. I could be kind of blank faced because I was feeling kind of blank about it. But but I had a lot of ability to put myself in their position. So I had a lot of cognitive empathy. So I could imagine life from their standpoint. But that blank facedness may feel like you're being meeting with someone who's not sympathetic or feeling any emotional feelings for you when it actually is not the case. I know that my sons, some of them have more blank faces than others of them, and I end up thinking like they don't care what I'm saying, or this is not like moving them or resonating with them, and it may even feel like they're like not invested in me or in the relationship. And then when I ask them, they're like, "Oh no, no, I care a lot. I that's really upsetting to me." We can miss it. We can end up feeling like because what we're not reading it on the face that the person's not feeling something. And also, they can struggle with connecting to other people, so sometimes intimacy can feel a little bit different with them, like, they may not have the same needs for touch or to be around somebody, they may have a lot of need for solitude, and that may feel like rejection or like we're not connected, when it really is more of they're just trying to manage being overloaded. Like, there's times, like, to be honest, when I get down on my Tuesdays after doing this live and meeting with my group, sometimes I have what I call an introvert hangover, where physically my head aches and my body aches, and I don't really want someone touching me. I'm kind of in overload. I'm overstimulated. So that can look like a problem with intimacy when it really is not a problem with intimacy. That's what an autistic person's doing to manage being overloaded with stimulation. Yes, I'm talking about autism versus narcissism. People who are autistic can look narcissistic, but they're not narcissists. They're autistic. And these are ways in which some of the symptoms have the same appearance, but they're there for different reasons and for different motivations. They're not the same. How can you deal with your son when he's overloaded? I think teaching him to put it into words really that's for me. Like my son when he comes up and wants to like, "Whoa, I need space. Sorry, I love you and I want to hug you, but I need the space." So learning to articulate it. Now, some autistic people have language issues, so maybe he's not very good at that. Here's another way that autistic people struggle is we don't always know what we're feeling. I take days to figure out what I feel, believe it or not. So something happens to me, and if you ask me in the moment, what am I doing with it? Like I can tell you, like I'm reacting. I don't know how I'm feeling, but I'm reacting. It takes time for me to know that. So yeah, I think sometimes while being pursuits, we do feel too much. I think we feel such a high level that we're like, in a state of like overstimulation or shock. So sometimes I need time. I just need the space and time to figure all that out. It's a process. I know this is completely off topic. We're not talking about about narcissism. Here's another really great question, though. Does autism make you vulnerable to narcissists? I can tell you, I know too many autistic people who've been in a narcissistically abusive relationship. Yeah, I think we're really vulnerable. Here's why I was really vulnerable. I overshared. I don't pick up on deception well. And sometimes you guys will make a joke and I completely miss it because I'm reading it literally. Yeah, I will miss it. So I do think that that makes some of us will have a harder time seeing and reading into the duplicity. I think that's very common. If you met the old me before all this happened, I was like an open book, seriously. I mean, the what I told my narcissistic ex in our when we first met, I had reams of letters I shared with him way too much about myself, what I was looking for, what I wanted, what I dreamed of. I mean, the amount of material I gave this guy was huge. Now I'm realizing don't do that. You know, oversharing when you've been traumatized is normal. That's the initial part of the processing phase. We all overshare right after we've been traumatized, but autistic people just overshare. We We just don't really have a good filter for that. Again, that's a social skills problem, social cues problem. We're sort of struggling to manage that. So I know for those of you who are not autistic, this is probably a really wild discussion. For those though, but if you're someone that wonders this about yourself, if you are autistic and you're a woman, check out Samantha Kraft, like Craft, Samantha Kraft's page. She's done some early research on late diagnosed women and autistic women. It's very informative. And go to aspiestest.org. ASPIES test. ASPIE, no, I'm sorry, ASPIE tests.org. ASPIEtests.org. And that is there's a test called RITVO. And that's a really great test for autism. Take it like you're your child when you're a child and you're answering these questions at your most vulnerable time when you're your most nerdy self. That would be a great way to take that test to know if you're autistic. So the site for the test is ASPIE tests tests.org. So ASPIE, like Asperger, aspiestests.org. That's where you can take that test to find out if you're autistic. Yep, you got it. Thank you, Sugar Cookie. That's it. Yep. All right, you guys, this is really a lot of fun. We had a big discussion on love bombing. Be sure if you're looking for support, check out Toxic Free Relationship Club. It's a great way to get community support for less than one coaching call a month. If you want to know that you're not alone and this happens to me, a psychologist, please check out my book, Love You More. It's now on Kindle Unlimited, guys. I moved it to Kindle Unlimited. So if you're looking to read this and you thought, oh, I already have that Kindle plan, I don't want to buy a book, well, it's now for free. You can read it for free. And so I'm super excited about that. And if you're looking for a 12-week group coaching specifically for help on healing after abuse, please check out Healed and Empowered. It starts August 31st at on Central, I think it's 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be doing a lot of skill building in that. So it should be super good. This is wonderful. I will see you guys back on Tuesday next week. Yes, I will be here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Much love to all of you. I love that name. That's really wonderful. I saw somebody's moniker just showed up as Much Love. That's really cool. Oh, it's great hanging out with you guys, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.